The 1980s gave us cartoon royalty, Transformers, He-Man, G.I. Joe. But for every hit classic, there was a desperate knockoff lurking in its shadow. These were the clunky copycats studios hoped you wouldn't notice. Today we uncover 15 of the worst animated rip-offs from the golden age of Saturday mornings. Brace yourself. Part 1 begins now. Number 15. The Incredible Hulk, 1982. Marvel's Hulk was no stranger to comics or live action, but when the He-Man craze erupted, Marvel tried to cash in with an animated Hulk series that felt awkwardly out of time. This version of the Green Goliath wore shredded gladiator gear, fought mythic beasts, and battled villains in what looked suspiciously like Eternia. The show ditched Hulk's signature rage and trauma in favor of fantasy tropes and sword and sorcery cliches. The problem was obvious. Hulk was never meant to be a muscle-bound hero swinging swords. He was a symbol of internal conflict. But this cartoon ignored the psychological angle and instead treated the Hulk like a roided-out Conan clone. Children familiar with Bruce Banner's plight found nothing relatable here. The animation was flat, the villains were dull, and the writing relied on predictable brawls rather than emotional stakes. It only lasted a single season, and Marvel quietly buried it. While He-Man spawned toys, comics, and spin-offs, this Hulk cartoon became an embarrassing footnote, a monstrous misfire in more ways than one. Number 14, Turbo Teen, 1984. The pitch was outrageous. A teenager merges with his car during a lab accident and now transforms into a literal sports car when exposed to heat. If Transformers was the cool kid at school, Turbo Teen was the weirdo who tried too hard. This show wanted to capitalize on the popularity of transforming vehicles, but delivered something that felt absurd even to kids. The transformation sequences were borderline grotesque, showing limbs turning into headlights and spines contorting into axles. It was unintentionally horrifying and left many young viewers disturbed rather than excited. The animation was rushed, and the dialogue stilted with sidekicks and villains that felt like off-brand leftovers from better cartoons. Even Knight Rider fans mocked it. It lacked the charisma of Michael Knight, the sleek design of Kit, and any real narrative drive. Turbo Teen never quite figured out if it was a superhero show, a sci-fi thriller, or a car commercial. The result was a skid mark on the decade's cartoon legacy. Number 13. The Mighty Orbots, 1984. At first glance, the Mighty Orbots looked like a polished and visually rich show, but underneath that Japanese-influenced animation was a recycled core concept. A team of quirky robots who fused into a giant hero to fight galactic evil. That was Voltron, and Transformers, and GoBots, only this version didn't stick. The robots were designed more for slapstick comedy than action. One robot burped fire, another juggled asteroids, and most episodes featured more hijinks than heroism. The team dynamic was uneven, the plots repetitive, and the villains forgettable. Despite a promising pilot, the series quickly derailed with tonal inconsistencies that left kids confused. Was it parody or power fantasy? Worse still, the Mighty Orbots got entangled in legal drama with GoBots and Tonka, which hastened its demise. It only lasted one season and has been largely forgotten. For a show trying to ride the robot trend, it malfunctioned on launch. Number 12. RoboForce, 1984. On paper, RoboForce had everything a toy exec dreamed of. Boxy action robots, cool weapons, and a gritty battle between good and evil. But in execution, it was a stuttering attempt to siphon attention away from Transformers and GoBots. The series centered around Max Steel and his fellow RoboForce members defending humanity from the evil cult of dread. It sounded epic. It looked anything but. The designs were clunky, the characters barely moved, and unlike Transformers with its sleek vehicle-to-robot morphing or Voltron's elegant merging giants, RoboForce featured stiff tank-like units that rolled awkwardly on rubber suction cups. The animation was painfully limited. The characters had no charm, no arcs, and no identities outside of function. It was like watching spare parts argue with each other. What made things worse was that RoboForce was essentially a one-shot promotional special, not a full series. It aired once and was forgotten almost immediately. Meanwhile, the toy line flopped. Kids simply didn't care about robots that couldn't transform, fly, or even bend their knees. RoboForce remains a classic example of how throwing money at a trend without understanding it leads to robotic disaster. No spark, no legacy, just noise. Number 11. The Biskitts, 1983. The Smurfs changed television. Their success inspired a wave of tiny people cartoons. The Biskitts was one of the worst offenders. Created by Hanna-Barbera, It followed a kingdom of small, dog-like creatures who protected a royal treasure in the forest from an evil pig king. It was adorable in concept, but allergic to originality. Everything about the Biskitts screamed copycat. A large cast of cute creatures with one-note personalities? Check. A villain who fumbled every plan? Check. An endless loop of rescue and retreat? Double check. Even the art style mimicked the round blue heads and colorful village of the Smurfs. But unlike Papa Smurf or Brainy, these characters were neither endearing nor memorable. The episodes blurred together. There was no real lore, no evolution, and no stakes. And while the Smurfs had a moral backbone, the Biskitts just barked. Hanna-Barbera hoped the magic of miniatures would strike again. It didn't. It lasted one season and was swiftly shelved. Today, it's barely remembered even among 80s cartoon historians. The Smurfs were a pop culture event. The Biskitts were just dogs in their shadow. Number 10. Sport Billy, 1980. Time-traveling kids with gadget-filled bags sound like fun, right? Enter Sport Billy, a bizarre European import aimed at American kids who already had Inspector Gadget and He-Man on their screens. The show followed Billy and his magical gym bag that could summon any sports equipment on command. He used this gear to stop evil from spreading across time. The concept was confusing, the execution worse. Sport Billy lacked charm. It featured one-dimensional characters, cartoonishly evil villains, and stories that hinged entirely on soccer ball saves the day logic. It tried to cram education into fantasy, but did neither well. The time travel plots were undercooked, and the magic bag was so overpowered it robbed every story of suspense. Visually, it was flat and cheaply animated. The pacing dragged, and the dialogue felt like it was written by people who had never seen children before. Worse still, it didn't even look good next to other 1980s cartoons. It felt like it had time-traveled in from a less imaginative decade. While Inspector Gadget became a phenomenon, Sport Billy vanished into rerun limbo. His bag might have been magical, but no one ever reached for it again. Number 9. Chuck Norris, Karate Commandos, 1986. If G.I. Joe had military precision, Karate Commandos was a playground brawl in slow motion. This 5-episode miniseries starred a poorly animated version of Chuck Norris, leading a team of multicultural stereotypes in mismatched outfits to fight ninjas bent on world domination. It was designed to sell action figures, but came off as a parody of the very thing it was trying to imitate. Instead of gritty realism or heroic camaraderie, the show offered lazy writing and incoherent plots. One episode involved a samurai ghost, another featured Chuck chasing a stolen microchip through a carnival. Each felt more disconnected than the last. Chuck Norris opened each episode with a live-action PSA about courage or discipline, but then the cartoon veered into cartoonish explosions and nonsensical kicks. The animation was stilted, the villains lacked menace, and the voice acting sounded like it was phoned in. Unlike G.I. Joe, where each character had a code name and a role, Chuck's team included a sumo wrestler named Too Much and a racially stereotyped Hawaiian named Tabe. Even kids recognized it as a shallow attempt to cash in on martial arts mania. Karate Commandos was over almost as soon as it began. But number 8, Dino Riders, 1988. Imagine dinosaurs with missile launchers controlled by psychic warriors. Sounds like a kid's dream. But Dino Riders couldn't rise above its confused identity. It borrowed the prehistoric wow factor of Thundercats and the tech-driven warfare of Transformers, but failed to fuse them into a coherent story. The plot was overcomplicated. A group called the Valorians fled a war by traveling through time to the age of dinosaurs. There they battled the evil Rulons using mind control helmets to tame Triceratops and T-Rexes. But rather than being fun, it felt like watching a toy commercial desperately pitching 20 playsets per episode. The writing was overloaded with exposition. Characters spouted technobabble while riding brontosauruses like tanks. The action was constant but repetitive, and emotional stakes were non-existent. The Valorians were bland heroes. The Rulons were mustache-twirling villains. No nuance, just shouting and lasers. Despite impressive dinosaur designs, the show collapsed under its own excess. The toy line flopped shortly after. Dino Riders had a roar, but no bite. Number 7. Moondreamers, 1986. If My Little Pony was cotton candy, Moondreamers was sugar overdose. Created by Hasbro, it followed celestial fairies tasked with delivering sweet dreams to children by battling nightmare monsters. It was so overstuffed with pastel fluff and squeaky voices, it became unbearable, even for its target demographic. The characters all had names like Whimsy or Sparklore, and each had a job in the Dream Factory, like mixing stardust or playing lullabies. They flew through space on rainbow comets and fought an evil sleep-stealing witch named Queen Scowleen, but even she was more annoying than threatening. There was no world building, no logic, just syrupy songs and moral-of-the-day cliches. Hasbro tried to ride the wave of My Little Pony's toy empire, but didn't invest in character development or story depth. Most kids didn't connect with the show, and many found it boring. Moondreamers was yanked from rotation almost immediately. A failed cosmic clone that floated away like a forgotten dream. Number 6. Defenders of the Earth, 1986. Take Flash Gordon, the Phantom, Mandrake, the Magician, and jam them into a team. That's what Defenders of the Earth tried. But instead of nostalgia-driven brilliance, it delivered recycled plots, stilted action, and emotional hollowness. The show leaned heavily on borrowed sci-fi and fantasy tropes but never honored the iconic characters it used. Each hero was stripped of what made them legendary. Flash Gordon became a generic dad figure. The Phantom lost his jungle mystique. Mandrake became a magician cliché. Their kids joined the cast in a clear attempt to appeal to younger audiences, but ended up being bland exposition machines. Ming the Merciless was reduced to a cardboard villain yelling across space. The animation was serviceable but uninspired. The dialogue was wooden. And despite promising world-saving stakes, each episode felt like a paint-by-numbers afternoon filler. It ran for a full season but never generated fan enthusiasm or merchandising momentum. Defenders of the Earth was a graveyard of forgotten icons trapped in a poorly animated team-up. Number 5. King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, 1989. Take an American football team, now teleport them into medieval England. Replace King Arthur with the quarterback. Give them metal suits powered by vague magic. That's King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. It sounded like a parody, but was very real. The show tried to ride the fantasy wave of Thundercats and He-Man while adding a time travel gimmick. But the premise was so bizarre, it alienated both history buffs and action fans. The football players were all given knight personas and tasked with rescuing the real Arthur and his knights who were trapped in a cave. Yes, really. The armor transformations were flashy, but repetitive. The plots were formulaic, and the character arcs non-existent. Every villain was a cliché, every moral lesson forced. The show even tried to sneak in sports metaphors during sword fights. It felt like Power Rangers meets Camelot filtered through a broken VCR. Despite some cult curiosity today, it remains one of the most bizarre and poorly executed cartoons of the decade. Number 4. Laser Tag Academy, 1986. Laser Tag Academy was an unapologetic mashup of every popular 80s sci-fi trope bundled together to sell toys. It followed Jamie Jarren, the champion of the far-future sport of laser tag, who time-traveled to the present to protect her ancestors and battle a space villain named Draxon. If it sounds like Silverhawks meets Mask with a dash of Inspector Gadget, you're not far off. Instead of innovating, the show leaned hard into cliches, time portals, glowing guns, futuristic bad guys, and oversized shoulder pads. The animation was uninspired, the writing paper-thin, and the dialogue packed with cringe-worthy catchphrases. It tried to appeal to the Star Wars crowd, but delivered something closer to a daytime infomercial in space. Every episode revolved around using laser tag gear to solve temporal problems. It wasn't just product placement. It was the entire plot. The character designs were bland, the villains forgettable, and the technobabble never stopped. Despite its flashy packaging, the series failed to stick the landing. Laser Tag Academy vanished after one season, and even the toy line eventually fizzled. For a show about light-based action, it cast a long shadow of disappointment. Number 3. Spiral Zone, 1987. Spiral Zone tried to be edgy, mature, and thought-provoking, like G.I. Joe or Robotech, but its dark tone and convoluted premise quickly turned into a narrative mess. The show imagined a world under siege by a mutant-inducing ray controlled by the villainous Overlord. The few remaining unaffected humans formed an elite squad to reclaim cities from the Zone. That sounds like a cool dystopia on paper. But the execution was heavy-handed. The animation was inconsistent, the music ominous but repetitive, and worst of all, the storytelling was so serious it became unfun. Characters rarely smiled. Dialogue dripped with faux gravitas. while G.I. Joe balanced action and personality. Spiral Zone doubled down on doom and gloom. The Zoners were faceless zombie slaves. The heroes had no internal conflict, no development, no humor, just mission after mission in a gray, washed-out world. Parents didn't approve. Kids didn't connect. It ended after 65 episodes with almost no fanfare, a cautionary tale of how trying to be too serious in an action toy cartoon can spin you straight into obscurity. Number 2. Pole Position, 1984. Inspired by the popular arcade game Pole Position, this cartoon had almost nothing to do with racing. Instead, it followed a pair of stunt-driving siblings who moonlighted as secret agents in high-tech talking cars. It wanted to be Mask. It wanted to be Knight Rider, but it never figured out what it really was. The vehicles had personalities like Kit, but without the charm. The missions were vague and forgettable, and the action sequences lacked velocity. For a show named after speed, the pacing was often sluggish. Its animation was passable, but its character development was flat. The villains were underwritten, and the stakes rarely mattered. Even the gadgets felt like knockoffs of cooler shows. By the third episode, it was clear this was less a race and more a scenic detour into mediocrity. While Mask launched a franchise and Knight Rider burned rubber through pop culture, Pole Position was parked and forgotten. A missed gear shift in the middle of the action animation highway. Number 1. C.O.P.S. 1988. Fighting crime in a future time. That was C.O.P.S. catchphrase. Unfortunately, it was also its biggest problem. The show featured a team of futuristic law enforcers battling crime syndicates with over-the-top tech in a neon-lit city. Sound like G.I. Joe in police uniforms? That's because it was. The characters had pun-filled names like Bulletproof and Longarm. Each had a tech gimmick. Each episode tried to spotlight gadgets and explosions. But while G.I. Joe gave us real-world stakes and global intrigue, C.O.P.S. gave us cartoonish criminals and repetitive brawls. Its designs were bulky, its tone uncertain. It wanted to be serious but kept slipping into slapstick. And while the animation was decent for the time, it lacked the spark or tension needed to keep viewers invested. G.I. Joe became an enduring brand. C.O.P.S. was canceled after one season, and mostly remembered for its awkward name change to C.O.P.S in reruns. It aimed to arrest the market. Instead, it got locked in cartoon jail. Boim! From glowing ninjas to talking cars, these 15 cartoons tried to ride the coattails of giants and face-planted instead. Rip-offs rarely age well, and these flops prove it. Which ones do you remember? Which do you regret watching? Hit that subscribe button for more forgotten animation legends and laughable mistakes from TV history.